Like and subscribe to PalsFundamentals on YouTube for more videos like this. Sources, link below. Welcome, everyone. We're calling this our North Atlantic News Report.
Yeah, that's right.
Today, we're going through a bunch of recent sources covering updates from Greenland, Iceland, Shetland, and the Faroe Islands. Our goal is pretty straightforward. Just pull out the key info, the important facts from these reports.
And crucially, for this report, we're sticking only to what the sources actually say.
Exactly. No opinions, no trying to read between the lines, just presenting the information as reported.
We're assuming you listening have the basics of the region down, so we can jump right in.
Perfect. Think of us as guides through this news pile.
That's the idea, highlighting what stood out from the material.
Okay, let's start with Greenland then.
Right, Greenland. There's quite a bit here, especially around geopolitics and defense.
Yeah, one thing that really caught my eye was this new report from the Danish Defense Academy about China's Arctic ambitions.
And what's, fascinating there, according to the sources, is China's view on the Arctic Council.
They see it as insufficient.
Basically, yeah, because it mainly includes countries with Arctic territory. So it kind of sidelines non-territorial powers, like China, from the direct influence they seem to want.
And the drivers for that interest. Sources mention resources, obviously, but also
The Northern Silk Road.
Right.
Melting ice opening up new sea routes, and access to seabed resources, both big factors.
The report's assessment is pretty direct, too. Expecting a Chinese military presence within, 10 years?
That's what it says. And it points out this isn't just theory. There have already been Chinese military exercises up there, some even with the Russian fleet.
So the recommendation from the Academy is stronger cooperation.
Reinforced defense cooperation, specifically between Greenland, Denmark, the Faroes, and allies, preparing for more encounters with the Chinese Navy.
And this ties into the Russia situation, too.
It does. The report suggests Russia's growing dependence on China, because of sanctions and the war, might give China more leverage, even in the Russian Arctic.
One expert quoted said it's hard to push back once non-Arctic states gain influence.
Exactly. It becomes a real diplomatic challenge.
Okay, so that's the external picture. What about Greenland's own defense setup, Art Command and Nuuk?
Right, headquartered there since 2012. Its main jobs, as the sources lay out, are maritime surveillance and sovereignty enforcement around Greenland and the Faroes.
And there's history there. Danish soldiers enforcing sovereignty way back since the 1700s.
Yeah, against foreign whalers originally. Quite the history.
Today it's the 4 inspection ships. Thetis, Triton, H. Vidbjørn, Veteran. Getting on a bit, aren't they? Built 89 to 92.
They are, and they patrol constantly, year-round. But they do a lot more.
Like search and rescue.
SAR support, yes, though it's led by Greenland Police and JRCC. Also, icebreaking, fisheries inspection, oil pollution control, helping police, hydrographic surveys. It's a long list.
So the core peacetime tasks are really about knowing who's there and enforcing the rules. Surveillance and sovereignty, using helicopters too.
And the Seahawk helicopter, since 2016, specifically mentioned for SAR hoist operations, lifting people out.
There was a note from a commander, too, about more tourists needing help.
Yeah, an observable increase, apparently. Both people on land and from cruise ships needing assistance. Sign of the times, maybe?
And looking forward, there are negotiations. Chapter 2 of a new defense agreement.
That's right, involving Nulakkersut, Denmark, and the Faroes, aiming to boost surveillance and security.
Part of that involves replacing the ships.
Yes, the plan reported is for 3 new ships to replace the current 4 older ones. And just recently, an announcement about increased defense presence in the coming months.
Okay, let's shift to politics and international relations. Some interesting points there.
Definitely. Like the debate around President Macron's visit, Paley Broberg's comments.
Right, the Nalarak leaders suggesting the Danish PM, Mette Frederiksen, shouldn't attend the meeting in Greenland.
His reasoning, as reported, was pretty blunt. If Macron wanted to visit Denmark, he'd go to Denmark. Greenland can handle its own meetings.
And he mentioned something about not needing Danish espionage.
That's the quote reported in the sources, yes. Pretty strong words.
Then there's the whole Donald Trump and Greenland situation. Still ongoing interest reported.
Seems so, according to the sources, dating back to late 2024. His continued public interest in, acquiring Greenland.
Followed by Donald Trump Jr.'s visit to Nuuk in January 25, and Trump Sr.'s comments about potentially using force and believing it will happen.
Which, understandably, led to that huge demonstration in Nuuk back in March, possibly the largest ever there, the sources suggested.
Then the U.S. strategy supposedly shifted. The New York Times piece mentioned focusing on soft power, private investments.
Right. Trying to win favor, essentially. But then came that Wall Street Journal story in May.
About ordering intelligence agencies, CIA, NSA, DIA, to gather more intel.
Yeah, including identifying Greenlanders who might help U.S. goals, which, as the sources noted, raised suspicions of espionage among some observers.
And Macron's comment capping it off, Greenland is not for sale.
A clear statement reported around that time.
Okay, turning to domestic policy. Cannabis decriminalization proposal.
From Adisut Chairman Akalu Jeremiason, his reasoning, as reported, is pretty pragmatic. Deal with current use, maybe generate income, tackle smuggling.
He's talking legalization, but regulated.
Yes, not a free-for-all. Suggesting publicly regulated cannabis bars, public purchase and distribution, maybe with private actors involved.
And he thinks it could reduce hard drug use, based on other countries.
That's his belief, citing studies mentioned in the sources. Less smuggling, too. He apparently isn't worried about more addiction, focusing instead on better treatment.
Funded by taxes from the cannabis sales.
Exactly. Using tax revenue and fees for treatment and anti-smuggling efforts. That's the idea reported.
And this might be debated in the autumn.
Expected to be, yes, if the chairmanship approves it.
Lastly, for Greenland, the finances of Nukisjurfit, the energy company.
Not great news there, according to the figures reported. Deficits of 60.2 million DKK in 24, 86.2 million in 23.
And the average over 5 years is nearly 82 million DKK.
Yeah, it's a consistent issue. The Energinallakersusak called it a well-known problem. Income just doesn't cover costs.
But they're working on a plan to balance things, while stressing how vital the company is.
Absolutely essential. Electricity, water, heat provider. But remember, back in 2022, they said they needed 1.8 billion DKK just for renovating assets.
Wow, that puts the deficits in perspective.
It certainly does. A big challenge.
Okay, quite a lot happening in Greenland. Let's move over to Iceland. What do the sources say there?
All right, Iceland. First up, a rather unusual incident. An aircraft losing a wheel.
Yeah, a training plane. Lost its nose wheel on approach to Reykjavik Airport.
And the wheel landed. Where?
Right on Ostervoller.
Yeah.
The square in front of the Alazingi, the parliament building.
Good grief. Anyone hurt?
Thankfully, no. But it shattered a paving stone. Witnesses said tourists were just meters away. Very lucky.
Incredible. And the plane landed safely.
Yes, managed to land without the nose wheel. 2 people on board, uninjured. Police and the accident investigators are looking into it.
Okay. Then there's a sadder story from Esja Mountain.
Yes, the sources report a hiker who went missing was found deceased yesterday on the slopes of Kistefell.
The search started Monday evening, went through the night, and resumed Tuesday. Coast Guard helicopter, drones involved. A sad outcome.
Shifting topics. Something about the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and information on citizens abroad.
Right. According to a parliamentary inquiry response reported in the sources, the ministry doesn't actually know how many Icelanders got military training overseas.
Or served in active conflict zones between 2010 and 2025.
Correct. They don't hold that data. What they do track, apparently, are applications to Norwegian military academies under a 1995 agreement.
How does that work?
Applicants go via the Icelandic MFA, which can comment, then forwards it to the Norwegian embassy. After that, it's direct between the academy and applicant. The MFA isn't told who gets in.
And they didn't say how many applications they'd received?
Not disclosed in the reply reported in the sources, no.
Interesting gap in information.
Yeah.
Okay, lastly for Iceland, a power outage.
Yes, in South Iceland today, Landsnet finished repairs on the Ivals-Velarlína 1 line. It tripped this morning around 10 a.m., caused widespread outages.
Power's back now, though.
Restored shortly after lunchtime, yes. But the sources mentioned backup power, like InvestManager, couldn't handle the full load.
The mayor there wasn't happy.
Called it unacceptable. Highlighted worries for residents, businesses, even basic services like kindergartens needing heating, especially in the cold.
Understandable frustration. Okay, that covers Iceland. Let's jump over to Shetland.
Right, Shetland. First up, concerns about marine litter affecting wildlife.
Specifically gannets.
Yes, sadly. Recent reports of tangled gannets, 2 found dead in the last few days.
There was that account from Ian Nicholson, finding 2 tangled by the beak.
Horrible image, isn't it? 1 alive, 1 dead. He freed the live one, but it couldn't fly.
And Councillor Armitage saw similar things at Nos. Called it a shocking visual reminder. Dead bird hanging, another flying with twine.
The sources do mention gannets sometimes use litter in nests, which is part of the problem. Though it also notes these deaths, while upsetting, are, well, minor compared to avian flu or climate change impacts.
Are there efforts to combat this?
Yes, the Fishing for Litter scheme is highlighted. Fishermen collect litter caught in nets. Over 2,300 tons collected in Scotland since '05. There's a drop-off point in Lerwick.
And the Fishermen's Association.
They acknowledge it, participate in the scheme, but also point out it's not just them. Accidental gear loss happens, but international fleets, hobby fishers, other industries contribute too.
Okay. Shifting to finance the Shetland Charitable Trusts Fund.
Some recovery there. The value's up to $458.8 million from $432.6 million at the start of the financial year.
Linked partly to recovering from market turbulence related to Trump's presidency.
That's what the sources suggest. Specifically, Jean-Mar, escalating trade tensions hit U.S. markets, while European markets did better, reportedly buoyed by increased defense spending and fiscal stimulus.
And a return covered their spending.
Yes, the 2.6% return, $11.3 million, was enough to cover grant spending of $9.4 million. The chair sounded cautiously optimistic, saying investments are creaking back up.
They also appointed a new trustee, Andy Turnbull.
Yes, an environmental consultant, nature-based investment advisor, relevant background for the trust.
Then there's the Stuart Hill case, the sovereignty campaigner.
Right, the 82-year-old. Jailed for 3 months, the sources say, for refusing an unpaid work order.
Which stemmed from refusing to pay an old fine.
Exactly, the 2017 fine. He wouldn't do the 75 hours unpaid work, refused to sign court papers, and apparently issued the sheriff invoices for £264,000 from the sovereign nation of Shetland.
Claiming that the court had no authority.
Called it a legal fiction, according to the reports, challenged jurisdiction right up until sentencing.
Okay, moving on. Wind farm substation approval near Lerwick.
Yes, SIC gave the final go-ahead for Statkraft's proposal.
This is to connect the Mossy Hill wind farm.
Correct. To a new underground cable. It actually involves 2 substations on the site, one for Statkraft, one for SAN transmission.
Were there objections?
Oh, yes. Visual impact, concerns about peatland, and especially the risk to Lerwick's drinking water source, Sandy Loch, which is fairly close.
How was that risk assessed?
Planning officers thought visual impact was minor to moderate, peatland impact suitably mitigated. Scottish Water had no objection, calling the risk to public supply very low, but advised care. One objector's quote was pointed, "Very low is not no risk."
Did Scottish Water raise any specific concerns, like chemicals?
They asked about PFAS chemicals, yes, the forever chemicals, whether they be used.
And was an environmental impact assessment done?
Apparently not deemed required by the planning department. A council member questioned that decision, according to the sources. Statkraft plans mitigation measures like tree planting and conditions to protect watercourses.
And the wind farm itself, Mossy Hill.
That's a revised plan, application still pending. 8 turbines, 155 meters tall, expected by autumn 2028 if it goes ahead.
Okay. What about the Marine Sustainability Conference at UHI Shetland?
Timed with the UN Ocean Conference in Nice and UK action on bottom trawling.
That was the aim.
Bringing industry and researchers together, discussing sustainable management, restoration, citizen science, planned seagrass planting this summer. UHI Shetland also launched a new guiding marine restoration plan.
And UHI Shetland got a new board chairman.
Stephen Leask, a counselor with previous management and consulting experience, he's quoted looking forward to collaboration, building a college that meets community and industry needs.
Right. And finally for Shetland, a big donation to the Viking Genes Project.
Huge, yes. £25,000 from the North Yell Development Council, their largest single donation yet. NYDC uses wind farm income for community projects.
The project leader must have been pleased.
Delighted, hoping it encourages other community funders. The project's goal is that 1 million campaign for genetic screening.
To identify higher genetic risk for certain conditions. Focus on prevention.
Exactly. They hope to screen 5,000 Shetlanders, and they highlighted a previous success. Yell volunteers helped find a gene variant linked to cardiomyopathy risk, which is a heart condition. They've alerted over 10 people with Yell ancestry based on that.
So this donation helps expand that work.
Helps hire more staff, allows more people to benefit from the screening for preventative health care. That's the idea.
Great news for the project. Okay, that wraps up Shetland. Let's head to our final stop, the Faroe Islands.
All right, Faroe Islands, starting with the recent Danish royal visit.
Yes, the sources included parts of the Prime Minister's welcoming speech in Tórshavn.
He emphasized the shared history, culture, mutual respect between the Faroes and Denmark, quoted William Heinesen describing Torshov.
And talk about seeing tradition and renewal, nature, hospitality, concluding they stand stronger together.
That's the gist reported, yes. A warm welcome.
Then an important step in Nordic cooperation.
Big news there. The Nordic Council Presidium agreed unanimously. The Faroe Islands get a permanent seat in the Presidium.
Along with Greenland and Åland.
Correct. Previously, only the 5 main Nordic countries had permanent seats. This came from a proposal by electing reps, and a working group apparently had broad support.
When does this become official?
Final decision expected at the annual meeting in Stockholm this autumn. Hanni Hoydal was quoted, calling it an important step for more responsibility and influence.
And he mentioned potential for full membership later.
During future Helsinki Treaty changes, yes, a possibility down the line.
Okay. What about population figures?
Just over 54,900 people as of May 1st, according to the sources.
Growth rate holding steady.
Yes, 0.6% growth in the last year, same as the year before. That's 329 people.
But down from the peak growth.
Considerably down from the 1.8% peak in summer 2019. That was about 900 people in a year. Recent growth is evenly split between natural increase and net migration.
Right. And some sports news. Football.
A win! Faroe Islands beat Gibraltar 2-1 in Tórshavn in a World Cup qualifier.
How did the match go?
Gibraltar led 0-1 at halftime. Then Arne Fredriksberg scored direct from a corner amazing goal to make it 1-1. Patrick Johannesson got the winner in the 86th minute.
Good gripe.
Over 2,700 spectators reported. Puts the Faroes on 3 points in the group. Czechia leads with 9.
Okay. The fisheries minister was at that UN Ocean Conference in Nice too.
Yes, focusing on SDG 14, ocean protection and sustainable use.
Did he meet with anyone significant?
Met the EU Fisheries Commissioner, discussed relations, shared interest in managing North Atlantic pelagic stocks sustainably. The minister highlighted Faroes' actions on mackerel and herring, hoped for agreements on migratory stocks.
Anyone else?
Also met the Norwegian Fisheries Minister, close cooperation there. And visited the public green zone, saw a presentation on seaweed cultivation.
Attended a meeting on sustainable fishing too.
Yes, covering illegal fishing, regional cooperation, climate change impacts. Busy conference.
Staying with fish, the mackerel spawning survey results.
The Faroes vessel Jakob Sverre finished its part last week.
Where do they find the most eggs?
East towards the European shelf and west of the shelf edge. But the key finding reported
Fewer eggs.
about 25% fewer mackerel eggs in their survey area compared to 2022.
And this is part of a bigger international survey.
Yes, multiple countries involved. Final combined results expected in August. It's usually done every 3 years.
The sources even mention egg size.
Aha! Yes, 1.1, 1.3 millimeter diameter. Hatch in 1-2 weeks, depending on temperature. Nice detail.
Fascinating. Okay, changing tack completely. Archaeology on Sandoy at Sondom.
Yes, an important excavation. Ruins near the coast are being eroded by the sea. Building sea defenses is difficult there.
So they're digging to learn what they can before it's lost.
Exactly. It's the National Museum and Aarhus University collaborating. 14 archaeology students helping this year.
What have they found so far?
This year, under the turf, a square building from recent times, maybe a seaweed stack. They're recording that before going deeper to medieval Viking layers.
But previous digs found older stuff, visible in the bank.
Yes, ash and stone layers from older settlements seen in the eroding coastline from digs in 94 and 06, 07. And a really big news from C14 dating.
Barley grains, showing much earlier visits.
Dates between 300, 500 AD and 500, 700 AD. That's potentially 300 plus years before the traditionally accepted Norse settlement around 800 AD. Huge implications.
Amazing. And they moved a threatened stone house.
Yes, moved it inland, rebuilding it now. The dig continues for 2 more weeks this year, planned again for next year.
Wow. Okay, one final point from the Faroes. The housing situation.
It sounds like a serious challenge. The group Bugva reported the situation has worsened.
People actively asking for help with rent.
Calling for help because they can't afford rent. That's the quote reported. A difficult situation.
Okay, we have really covered a lot of ground today. From those big geopolitical currents affecting Greenland, right down to, emergency landings in Iceland, gannets tangled in litter in Shetland, and these incredibly early dates from archaeology in the Faroes.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? You see these communities dealing with global forces, geopolitics, climate change hitting wildlife and markets, but also intensely local things, energy bills, preserving heritage, funding health projects, housing costs.
Absolutely. They're constantly balancing these internal needs and these huge external pressures. So maybe a final thought for you listening based on everything we've heard from the sources today.
Go on.
How do the very unique circumstances of each, place their specific environment, history, politics, how does that shape the way they respond to both their own local challenges and these big global pressures? It seems like a constant negotiation.
That's a great question to ponder, how that local context filters everything else.
Like and subscribe to PalsFundamentals on YouTube for more videos like this. Sources linked below.